And that's what happened at the creation of the earth. Now, with that in mind, let's think about this. So when God creates the earth, it's kind of like creating the earth with an eggshell with no cracks. There's a lot of extra moisture in the upper atmosphere that's not there today. There are shallow seas after the land comes up. There are shallow seas in the Pacific Sea, the Indian Sea. There is no Atlantic because the land masses all fit together. But let's think about this for a second. When the Bible says water's below, couldn't that also mean inside? Wouldn't that be below? Well, let's think about it. The waters below, those are those waters that we found back in 1909. So God created the earth like an eggshell with no cracks. Right underneath the eggshell was that layer of water, and then below that was the rest of the earth. And let's think about what happens at the time of Noah's flood. 1,656 years after creation, God says it's time for the flood, correct? It's kind of like this. God goes to Caesarea Philippi right there. He takes out this 4-mile-long pin, sticks it down into the earth to that layer of liquid steam, that accident looking for a place to happen, and then he goes like that. Now what's going to happen next? The water's going to start to come up that hole. It's going to come up that hole about 4 miles, but when it reaches the surface, it's going to go to atmospheric pressure, right? And just like the pressure cooker, it's going to go boom. Is that right? Well, let's think about this. When that happens, what's that going to do to the size of the hole? Well, it's going to make the hole bigger. But if the hole's bigger, then you're going to get more water. But it's going to explode. So that'll make the hole bigger. And then you get more water. Then a bigger hole. Then more water, bigger hole, more water, bigger hole, more water. Is that correct? And that crack starts forming at Caesarea Philippi, coming down here, forming what is today the bottom of the Jordan River Valley. When it gets to today, Eilat, it turns and comes down this way, forming what is today the bottom of the Red Sea. Is that correct? But notice this. When that crack gets to the south end of the Red Sea, right there, it no longer has to cut all the way through a continent. It only has to cut through an ocean floor. And so it has less resistance, it has less work to do, so it can do more work faster. And so, well, we can see the crack gets bigger faster right here. Is that correct? Comes down here, splits, goes east and west, and breaks off 3 continents. Now, let's think about this for just a second. Of course, I said that evolutionists say the continents all broke apart 120 million years and so forth at the rate of 2 inches per year. Actually, I say it all happened in just 1 year. So let's think. Evolutionists say it takes 120 million supposed years. I say it takes 1 year. Would you agree we both couldn't be right at the same time? Is that right? Oh, come on, folks. One of us is 119,999,999 years off. Exactly, correct? Oh. Well, let's see if we can tell who's telling the truth and who's not. Would that be fair? Excellent. Well, let's go back into the Atlantic Ocean for just a moment. Let's take a look. Now, if I could show you one piece of physical evidence that I'm right and they're wrong, that would be good. Agreed? Right? But if I can show you 4 pieces of physical evidence that I'm right and they're wrong, that would be better, correct? Well, let's just take a look at a little reality check. Now, first of all, think with me for a moment. If evolutionists were telling the truth, well, if the continents fit together, broke apart, moved to where they are today in 120 million years, at the rate of 2 inches per year, what would be the reasonable prediction of what they say? Wouldn't the reasonable prediction of what they say be this? That the rain would fall on the continents on both sides, washing mud into the Atlantic Ocean from both sides. And if the continents are only moving apart at 2 inches a year, shouldn't I have a thick layer of mud going from one continent to the other across the bottom of the Atlantic? Wouldn't that be the reasonable prediction of what they believe? That's right, isn't it? But let's do a little reality check. First of all, you notice that here, along the North American continent, there's a flat sand bottom right up against the continent, just like the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Is that correct? And here, there's a flat sand bottom along Argentina, along Brazil. Is that correct? No mud. And there's only 4,500 years worth of mud at the mouth of the Amazon River. Over here, along Africa and along Europe, is that correct? There's only 4,500 years worth of mud at the mouth of the Congo River. As I said earlier, there's only 4,500 years worth of mud at the mouth of all the great rivers, the Indus, Ganges, Yangtze, Seine, Rhine, Volga, Thames, St. Lawrence, Columbia. All the great rivers of the world have only 4,500 years worth of mud at their mouth. Now that should tell you that the continents were completely flooded only 4,500 years ago, and that they've only been eroding for the last 4,500 years. Is that right? Oh, that's a really easy to remember argument for a young Earth. Now, first of all, we don't have a thick layer of mud going from one continent to the other, right? So there is no thick layer of mud, right? Well, that's number one. Number two, we have a crack going right up the middle, fitting the basic shape of the continent. Is that correct? Agreed? Number three, we can clearly see the land looks like that. Is that correct? And on point number four, do these marks going east and west across this crack remind you of anything you've ever seen before? Those look like stretch marks, is that right? That's because they're stretch marks. Yeah. You see, you only get stretch marks like this when things happen fast, like 9 months. Is that right? Okay, the Earth is bigger, so it took 12. You see, it's... Okay, I know it felt like a globe, but it wasn't. So here I have 4 pieces of physical evidence. Is that right? I have flat sand bottom on both sides. Crack goes up the middle here. Shape of the land goes like that, and stretch marks. Is that correct? I don't think I need anything more to tell me that that all happened fast, like 1 year. How about you? Is that right? Another thing, too. Let's take a look. Now, remember I said that when God created the earth, he created the earth like a round ball of clay, but actually there was sort of an eggshell to it, and there was a lot of extra moisture in the upper atmosphere. There were shallow seas on the surface in the Pacific and the Indian. There was no Atlantic. And then I said right underneath that was that layer of water, correct? Think of a boat, and remember that all my questions are very simple and so forth, so keep the answer simple. Think of a boat floating on water. Now, if I had a boat floating on water, and I stuck a hole in the bottom of the boat, what's going to happen? The water's going to go up, and the boat's going to go down. Is that right? So if I stick a hole in the bottom of the boat, the water's going to go up, and the boat's going to go down. At creation, there were seas 1 mile deep in the Indian and Pacific Seas. There was a layer of water 1 mile thick below the surface. As this water erupted upward, the seafloor falls down, exchanging places. As the seafloor drops, it breaks off along the original edge of the continental shelf and drops down 1 mile. This action leaves a double continental shelf. Did you happen to notice that from India to Australia, along the south slope of Indonesia, there are 2 continental shelves? One is a mile deep, then it breaks off and goes another mile deep. Right here, there's a continental shelf. It's 1 mile deep, steps off, breaks down, and goes another mile deep right there. So let's think about this. As the water comes out, if the water goes up, the boat must go down, right? And so the entire Indian Ocean floor here is sinking down as the water comes out from beneath. So first of all, it is logical. But number 2, we have these double continental shelves to prove that that's exactly what happened. Now let's take a look here in the Pacific. Now here's that crack coming out here across the entire Pacific. Comes inlet here at the Baja and on around. But did you happen to notice that here from the Gulf of Alaska, along the south slope of the Aleutian Islands to Kamchatka, there is, there's 2 shelves. 2 continental shelves south of the Aleutian Islands here, showing that as the water came out of this big crack right here, if the water goes up, the boat must go down. And so the entire Pacific Ocean floor sank down 1 mile like an elevator. And the proof here, of course, first of all, are these double continental shelves from the Gulf of Alaska to the Aleutian Islands and onto here. But you'll also notice that here, from Kamchatka past Japan, China, Vietnam, there are also 2 continental shelves here. So from the Gulf of Alaska, on the south slope of the Aleutian Islands to Kamchatka, from Kamchatka past Japan, China, Vietnam, there are 2 continental shelves. And here's physical evidence that the entire floor of the Pacific Ocean sank 1 mile at the time of the flood. As a mile of water comes up, the ocean floor goes down 1 mile. Now, I said earlier that if I have one piece of physical evidence that's good, but 2 would be better, is that correct?